The modern GCCs must be capability-led with the speed of execution and strategic thinking embedded in its DNA. Regulatory concerns are valid and must be addressed upfront. One cannot retrofit culture later. How many people do I employ? What is the headcount that I have? I'm not suggesting that's not important, but that cannot be the primary measure of the success of a GCC.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to GCC Pulse CentreStage, a podcast aimed at bringing to you real stories behind the GCCs. The guest we have today is Divesh Singla. He's the SVP Global Operations and Managing Director for India and Philippines at Signant Health. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with him. He came across as somebody very genuine. His passion was very evident in the responses that he gave, and I had a lot of takeaways from the conversation. I hope you do too. Do watch and enjoy. Thank you. Hey Divesh, welcome to GCC Pulse CentreStage. We're super excited to have you here with us today and looking forward to the conversation. Now, you have had over 2 decades of experience both in the traditional services as well as GCCs, right? What made you initially come into the GCCs? What was your thought process? And how do you think GCCs have evolved since then? I think it was in 2016 when you joined Eli Lilly. Since then, how has your journey been? Has GCCs evolved?
Hey, hi, morning, Krishma. First of all, thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure, to be in your company and discussing some of these things. Responding to the GCC. So first of all, I would say I did not take, a conscious decision to be in the space of GCC. And that is primarily because the space has evolved over the period of time, from KPO to ODCs to GCCs eventually. I think what has changed over the period of time is the value proposition. So if I have to take myself back in the time, I would say that I joined this space back in 2006 when I joined an organization by the name of WNS Global Services. And I was brought in to expand the ODC, the offshore delivery center for GlaxoSmithKline, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. And since then, it has evolved, into a sort of a journey wherein subsequently I joined IMS Health, which is now IQVIA, wherein I witnessed like a first-hand how strategic offshoring can transform both cost structures and capabilities. So, and then came Eli Lilly, which you referred, in your question as well, which was a pure play GCC, in the sense the way we define GCCs as of today for the value and the capability benefits it delivers to the enterprise. So it was more of a journey coupled with a bit of serendipity related to the evolution of the industry as a whole. And when you ask me what I find most rewarding, for me, the one thing that I find most rewarding is the human transformation aspect of GCCs. I have built teams as small as 150, scale them up to around 2,000 people across different geographies. Seeing these individuals grow from analysts to global leaders is something which has been incredibly fulfilling so far.
GCC is a term which we use today, but then it has been evolving in different names over a period of time. So wonderful.
Yeah.
So you spoke about how, you find the human evolution the most rewarding. But what are the mandates with which GCCs are or companies are coming into India and setting up of GCCs? Is it talent? Is it cost? Is it innovation? Or is it just a combination of all of these?
I think the mandate for today's global capability centers is a strategic blend. I would prioritize it as capability first, which is the talent, speed the second, strategic value the third, and cost optimization the fourth. Now, in a lot of our conversations and a lot of narratives that we hear around us, and even though I've ranked ordered it at number 4, which is cost of optimization, I would not say it is not important. It still continues to be one of the important pillars. The focus from a mandate perspective is making sure that we have the right capabilities, which is a blend of domain expertise and technological understanding, speed, strategy, and then comes cost optimization. Just to give you an example, when I was with Eli Lilly and Company, I had built an advanced analytics team's capabilities for the enterprise, which kind of spread across US, Japan, EU, and China. The mandate wasn't just cost arbitrage. It was about building world class capabilities that couldn't be replicated elsewhere. We achieved like multi-million dollar cost savings, which came along with the other benefits. So I would say cost saving for us was more of a byproduct of the process. But what was more important for us was that we positioned analytics as a core competitive advantage for the organization. So from my perspective, the modern GCCs must be capability led with the speed of execution and strategic thinking embedded in its DNA with cost arbitrage as a byproduct.
Very well put, Divesh. And I see more and more companies today coming into India primarily because of the skill availability, right? And because of the transformative workforce which is available, which can actually help them retain their IP and be able to scale their IT operations to the next level. Uh, and as you rightly put it, I couldn't have put it better, cost being just one of the byproducts. Uh, Now, you have spent over 2 decades in the life sciences and the pharmaceutical industry. One of the things which we have seen companies come in from this particular industry is having apprehensions on setting up a GCC because of regulatory requirements, because of security. How have you seen the companies with whom you have worked for and the company that you're currently working for overcome some of those challenges? And what would be your 2 cents towards companies which are looking to set up, as which functions can they probably go in first and which are easy picks?
The apprehensions are very well placed, Krishma. Regulatory concerns are valid and must be addressed upfront. How I approached it was number one, which is, the transparency. So, as managing director, chairman of the board for Signant Health currently, or when I worked with Parexel or Eli Lilly in the past, ensuring full visibility into our operations and governance for headquarters is very, very important. They need to see how things are happening 5,000 miles away, and things which are happening which is not only compliant to their internal processes but also to the statutory and regulatory aspects of the, from the laws of land perspective. The second aspect is the security framework. So implementing enterprise grade security with regular audits had been very important, and that's something that we've done, I've done in my journey. We maintain same security standards as our global operations. Local expertise becomes very, very important, building teams with deep regulatory knowledge of different markets, where the organization is participating is very important. Now, the professionals that we have hired or the talent that we have built, they understand FDA, EMA, and other regulatory agencies or regulatory frameworks globally. You asked me a question in terms of suitable functions, especially in the life sciences and pharmaceutical industry. I think starting with non-patient facing functions like data analytics, reporting, quality assurance, regulatory intelligence, clinical operations support can be a good starting point, and then this can pivot to more strategic, more patient facing sort of functions. These functions can deliver significant value while maintaining the compliance, the regulatory compliance that I spoke about. So for me, the key has always been starting with lower risk functions and demonstrating excellence before we expand to other sensitive areas.
And I think the companies which you spoke about that you have yourself worked for, and for some of the other life sciences companies which have now GCCs here, I think that's how they started and have evolved since then to taking up more complicated and complex functions into their GCC fold. Now, you spoke about regulatory. That is just one of the non negotiables. What, according to you, Devesh, are the other non-negotiables that any GCC should be looking for when they are setting up? Something which they think that, they should not avoid, they should not compromise on.
Absolutely, Krishma. I think I already spoke about regulatory and the compliance related aspects. Just to clarify, not necessarily only because of life sciences, no matter which industry the GCC is being set up for, compliance in different shapes and format is important, is existential to some extent. Apart from that, the second non negotiable for me is culture. Accountability, collaboration, recognition must be done from day one. One cannot retrofit culture later. In my experience, we've achieved great places to work, a lot of certifications because culture has been foundational for us and not an afterthought. The third thing for me would be context. In the current scenario of GCCs, the different conversations that we are having a lot of conversation around technology and how technology is one of the key benefits that the GCCs are delivering to the global enterprises, and rightfully so. I don't think that that is debatable. However, in my opinion, context, business understanding, domain expertise is also very important, because when our employees have the right context, has have the right understanding of the business, they will be able to identify the problem rightfully and be able to define the problem correctly and then find a solution to it. Context or domain expertise for me is contextual understanding, rather, or domain expertise for me is the third. We've spoken about technology, I mean, a lot around us. Cloud first infrastructure with, robust security, especially critical in our regulatory pharmaceutical environment. We've implemented integrated project management platforms which are compliant to all the regulatory aspects. So technology is the next. Last but not the least, I think local leadership with global mindset. That's another non-negotiable. I ensure in my role as a managing director or a country head, I have that local expertise, that understanding of the local markets, but then having a more global enterprise perspective. We are not a unit, a function sitting outside the organization. We are well within the organization. We are part of the organization. So it's very important for me and leadership to understand what we are doing at an enterprise level. So those are some of the non-negotiables that I would call out, which should be taken into consideration when building or expanding a GCC.
Very well put, Divesh. And I would say that, what you mentioned about strategy and innovation as being one of the core requirements or the core goals for a GCC, they come from the perspective of, or they come from the requirement of understanding of the domain, because you cannot have an IP without having an understanding of the domain, as well as having a local leadership which understands what the goals of the headquarters are. And cultural integration, I think, is so very critical. It's not just about understanding what the core principles and values of your headquarters is, but also integrating with the local values or the culture of the location or the region where your GCCs is set up. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. We have spoken about the goals, we've spoken about the non-negotiables, but then it all comes down to how are they being measured. Devesh, what do you think are the KPIs under which GCCs should be governed, should be measured against? Should it be just in terms of their size? Should it be in terms of their talent, the value that they deliver? Or could it be all of it and more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a brilliant question, and a brilliant topic to discuss, Krishma, because in India, whether it was a GCC setup or it was a ODC setup, the different stages of evolution that we've seen, a number of times, or in most cases, we've measured the success of that function, GCC, for the sake of our conversation today. We've measured that by size, which is how many people do I employ? What is the headcount that I have? I'm not suggesting that's not important, but that cannot be the primary measure of the success of a GCC. Headcount, like cost, should be a byproduct of the value that the GCC is delivering to the parent organization and to the industry as a whole. So for me, I have not used headcount as a measure of success. We do use headcount as a KPI, but that is more to inform some of our other KPIs, which are related to talent, which is more in terms of employee satisfaction, attrition rates, time to hire improvement that we've seen over the period of time, leadership, pipeline strength. So I've used headcount, but to measure KPIs, which are more on the talent side of it. Delivery KPIs have been very, very important for us. So we continue to measure client satisfaction or customer satisfaction scores. I may be asked a question, why customer satisfaction scores? And that is because we ensure that everything and anything that we do, whether we are working directly with a customer outside of, from our GCC or not, we need to make sure that we are impacting the value that we are creating for our customers in a positive way. So customer satisfaction score is very important. SLA adherence and quality metrics, and I'm not necessarily referring to any SLAs that have particularly been set up for GCCs. I mean, that is a default. But SLAs or quality metrics that we have between our organization and the customers as well. Revenue per employee is another way of looking at it, because that helps us understand what is the bottom line back that we are delivering to the organization. Process automation percentage, how much of automation we have deployed using different technologies. Then I think I would call out certain set of innovation KPIs as well. Cost savings through transformation, the speed of delivery that we may have impacted. For example, one of our functions within the India and Philippines GCC put together a AI based solution which helped us reduce our time to market for one of our solutions at Signant Health by 30%. So revenue generation from new capabilities would be another one. And lastly, digital transformation, project success rates. So those are the KPIs which I believe modern GCCs should be measured upon. Bottom line for me is that it has to be a balance between operational excellence, but with strategic value creation. So the KPIs have to be balanced. And although I may have listed down approximately 10 KPIs, I typically don't go beyond 6 or 7 KPIs to measure the success of GCC, at least the ones that I have worked for or the ones that I have set at.
And I think the bottom line is, what is the business value that you're delivering becomes one of the key KPIs, right? And that's what matters at the end of the day. Wonderfully put. In the interest of time, we'll probably move over to some rapid fire questions wherein we get a little bit more of information from you, but then probably one word answers to make it a little bit more interesting. What is the one thing that most GCCs should be doing, but they are not doing it today?
That would be having a dedicated culture ambassador program.
I think that's very true. If you had a magic wand, Divesh, and were allowed to create a tool which will help the GCC leaders today implement some things which they've always wanted to do, what would that tool be?
It will be an invisible time zone translator. Just to explain that, something that automatically optimizes my meeting schedules, communication timings, and workload distribution across global teams without anyone having to think about it.
Wow. And I hope you get to build that tool someday. And it'll be relevant not just for the GCCs, but for industries across. So looking forward to that tool. You spoke about, different things which the integration between the headquarters and, the GCCs which are there in India or could be in Philippines or many of the other countries, right? What are the common misconceptions with which the headquarters actually have on the GCCs, which needs to be killed at the initial stage itself or needs to be overcome?
I think I spoke about it. That's the misconception is that GCCs are just cost centers doing basic work. Yeah, I think that needs to be addressed right in the beginning.
Wonderful. Last but not the least, what are the 3 things that GCCs should do?
Innovation. There should be autonomy of operating within the GCCs with the right structured, boundaries. And lastly, it has to be a partnership between the GCC and the enterprise. The GCC should not be seen as a separate entity altogether.
Wonderful. And with that, we probably come to an end of the conversation, Divesh. I wish you all the very best. And to all the 3 things that you mentioned about the GCCs, I am sure that you're already doing it within your organization. And we look forward to many such contributions from you in the near future. And we look forward to many such conversations also with you in the near future. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Krishma. It was lovely having this conversation with you. Thanks a lot.